In a world teetering on the brink of darkness, where hope flickered faintly like a dying ember, Lord Orin strode as a solitary figure of unwavering light. His armor bore the scars of countless battles, each dent and scratch a story of survival, yet it still shimmered faintly under the low sun, as though reflecting a determination that could not be tarnished. The battlefield stretched endlessly before him, a grim mosaic of fallen comrades and foes alike. Blood soaked the earth, its dark crimson hue blending with the churned mud, while the stench of death clung to the air like an unwelcome fog. The undead horde had surged with relentless malice, their hollow eye sockets glowing with a sickly green light that defied the natural order. Orin's blade had risen and fallen, a silver blur amidst the chaos, his strikes unerring as he cleaved through the tide. Yet as the sun dipped lower, its fading rays casting long, skeletal shadows across the carnage, the weight of his actions pressed heavily upon him. His movements remained precise, but his gaze lingered too long on the lifeless faces of the fallen, warriors who had trusted him to lead them. The tide of battle finally broke with the last undead crumbling to ash, their remains scattered by the cold wind. Around Orin, the remnants of his order erupted in weary cheers, their voices carrying a note of relief, but he stood still, his sword lowered. Blood dripped from its edge, pooling darkly at his feet. He looked past the celebration, his focus fixed instead on a young squire sprawled motionless on the ground, his hand outstretched as if reaching for something just beyond his grasp. Nearby, a veteran warrior lay still, his once steely eyes staring vacantly at the overcast sky. These faces bore the weight of his choices, a reminder that victory came with a steep price. The march back to the capital was somber despite the faint songs of returning soldiers. Orin walked at the front, his head bowed slightly, his shoulders stiff under the heavy mantle of leadership. Sister Aliana fell into step beside him, her healer's robes streaked with blood and dirt. Her voice was soft, but her words carried a warning. "There are whispers, Orin. They say you've become more than a leader. You're becoming a symbol." She hesitated, her tone darkening. "And not everyone welcomes that." Orin's gaze remained fixed ahead, his jaw tightening as her words sank in. "Symbols are fleeting," he replied, his voice low and distant. "What matters is that we fulfill our duty." But even as he spoke, his hand tightened on the hilt of his sword, his knuckles whitening against the worn leather. Aliana's expression softened, but her voice remained firm. "Be wary," she said, her tone barely above a whisper. "Not all who walk in the light are free from shadows." The capital greeted them with pomp and fervor, the streets lined with cheering citizens. Drums thundered, and banners fluttered in the cold breeze, their bright colors a stark contrast to the somber faces of the soldiers. Orin's eyes drifted over the crowd, their joy a bitter counterpoint to the hollow ache gnawing at his core. He saw a mother lifting her child, the boy's face radiant with admiration, and the sight twisted the knife of his guilt. They celebrated because they did not understand the cost. Inside the grand hall, the king's booming voice extolled Orin's valor, the medal of honor gleaming as it was placed around his neck. The applause was deafening, but Orin's eyes moved past the crowd to the shadows at the edge of the room, where Lord Commander Irinda stood. The man's expression was a mask of polite approval, but his sharp gaze cut through the air like a blade, a predator watching its prey. His smile was thin, a mere suggestion of warmth that never reached his calculating eyes. Later, in the privacy of a dimly lit corridor, Irinda's voice was a cold whisper among his conspirators. "Orin's rise threatens the order itself. He is no longer just a man. He is becoming an idea, and ideas are far more dangerous than swords." His fingers tapped rhythmically against the hilt of his weapon, his tone unyielding. The people's faith must remain in the Order, not in a single man. His words hung in the air like a blade poised to strike. The conspirators exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared to challenge Irinda's conviction. His gaze turned to the window, where moonlight painted his face in sharp relief, his eyes betraying a flicker of ambition. As the night deepened, Orin found himself in the cathedral garden, the air cool and heavy with a scent of damp earth. He knelt beside a small fountain, its gentle trickle the only sound in the stillness. The weight of his choices pressed down on him, and his mind swirled with images of the fallen. Their faces haunted him, a relentless tide that would not ebb. From the shadows, Aeliana emerged, her steps hesitant but deliberate. She stopped a few paces away, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "You cannot carry this burden alone, Orin," she said softly. "There are forces at play, forces that would twist even your noblest intentions." Orin rose slowly, the motion deliberates, as though his body resisted the effort. His gaze met hers, the weariness in his eyes replaced by steely resolve. "Let them try," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I will not falter. Not now. Not ever." The garden fell silent once more as Aeliana watched him retreat into the shadows, her heart heavy with unspoken fears. Above them, the stars glimmered faintly, their light distant and cold. The light is not the only thing that guides us. In the shadows, other forces stir, waiting for those bold or desperate enough to heed their call.